They laughed at the poor boy with an old horse. That's how the story that stopped an entire town began. What was meant to be a cruel joke turned into a personal challenge. Tyler and his discarded horse dared to face the champions with courage and soul. But what happened on the track made even the most skeptical fall silent. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. In the small town of Clear Springs, rural Kentucky, the sun was already rising, on the horizon when Tyler Morgan woke up. At 22, he didn't have much beyond his dreams, and the small wooden house where he lived with his mother, Mrs. Connie Morgan, a washerwoman known for her honesty and calloused hands. That morning, like all others, Tyler rose before dawn to help his mother hang clothes on the makeshift clothesline in the backyard. "Son, you need to find better work. That job at the Andersons' ranch barely pays the bills," commented Mrs. Connie, wringing a sheet forcefully. "Mom, you know jobs aren't easy to come by around here, and since Dad left us, I need whatever comes along," replied Tyler, avoiding mentioning the pain they still felt from his father's passing, claimed by a sudden illness 3 years earlier. The young man worked as a general handyman at Sunrise Ranch, property of the most influential family in the region. Although the salary was minimal, Tyler had a special love for horses. In his spare time, he observed the trainers preparing the animals for the traditional summer festival race, an event that put Clear Springs on the map and attracted visitors from all over the region. That day, upon arriving at the ranch, Tyler found an unusual commotion. Thomas Anderson, the owner, was in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by his employees and his son, Richard, an arrogant young man who had inherited his father's haughtiness. "Come closer, Tyler," shouted Thomas with a malicious smile. "I have a gift for you, boy." The employees laughed discreetly as Tyler approached, suspicious. That's when he noticed, tied to a post, a horse with a pitiful appearance. The animal, once an imposing chestnut stallion, was thin, with dull coat and one of its hind legs visibly injured. "This is Windrunner," said Thomas, drawing laughter from those present. "He was a champion many years ago, but now, as you can see, he's at the end of the line. I was going to send him to slaughter, but I remembered you always wanted a horse." Richard intervened. "Maybe you could enter him in this year's race. It would be fun to see this nag trying to keep up with the thoroughbreds." Laughter echoed across the yard. Tyler felt his face burn with shame and anger, but his eyes met those of the horse. There was something in that dull gaze, a wounded dignity, a silenced story. "I accept," said Tyler, to everyone's surprise, "and I thank you for the gift, Mr. Anderson." Silence took over the scene. No one expected that reaction. "Well, the animal is yours now. You can take him, but I don't want to see him around here anymore," declared Thomas, irritated that he hadn't achieved the complete humiliation he had planned. With the help of an old halter, Tyler led Windrunner down the dirt road to his house. The journey, which would normally take 30 minutes, consumed almost 2 hours. The animal limped visibly and stopped frequently, as if each step was a battle. Upon arriving home, Mrs. Connie nearly fainted. "My son, have you lost your mind? We don't have money even for ourselves. How are we going to take care of a sick animal? Mom, they were going to kill him. Look at him, look into his eyes. He was once a champion, he deserves dignity." Improvising a shelter with old boards borrowed from neighbors, Tyler accommodated Windrunner in the small backyard. He spent his savings on hay, oats, and basic medications for infections. He carefully examined the animal, discovering several old scars under the mistreated coat. His neighbor, Old Joe, a 70-year-old man who had been a horse trainer in his youth, approached curiously. He observed the horse with experienced eyes, gently touching the marks on its body. Boy, this horse was not just any horse. These marks, this bearing, even debilitated. There's a story here that few know. What story, Old Joe? Windrunner was the pride of the late Helen Miller, an extraordinary animal that won 3 consecutive races about 8 years ago. After she passed away, the horse simply disappeared. Many said it was sold, others that it got sick and died, but I never believed that. Tyler felt a shiver run down his spine. Helen Miller? Mr. Edward Miller's wife? Yes, the same. Her husband never recovered from the loss. Their daughter Melissa was just a teenager at the time. They say she inherited her mother's love for horses, but her father forbade her from going near them after what happened. As they talked, Tyler noticed that the horse was watching them attentively, as if understanding every word. At that moment, he made a decision that would change his life forever. "I'm going to rehabilitate this horse, old Joe, and I'm going to find out what really happened." The old man smiled, recognizing the determination in the young man's eyes. "You'll need a lot of strength, boy, but something tells me you're not alone in this journey." At nightfall, after a whole day caring for Windrunner, Tyler fell asleep next to the animal in the small, improvised shelter. His last thought before falling asleep was that, as impossible as it seemed, he had found a purpose greater than himself. The next morning, Tyler awoke to Windrunner's soft neigh. There was something different about the animal. Its eyes seemed more alive, as if the simple fact of being in a safe environment had awakened something inside. Tyler ran his hand over the horse's rough coat, silently promising that he would do everything to restore its dignity. After improvising a bandage on the animal's injured leg, Tyler walked to the town market to buy more hay and medicines. His budget was limited, but every penny saved during months of hard work now had a greater purpose. As he passed through the central square, he noticed curious looks and heard malicious comments. "That's the boy who accepted the dying horse from the Andersons. They say he's going to enter it in the summer festival race. Can you imagine? Absurd. The washerwoman's son always had his head in the clouds. Now he's wasting what little he has on an animal that won't last until next month." Tyler continued on his way, pretending not to hear. At the veterinary pharmacy, the clerk received him with skepticism when he asked for ointments for deep wounds and strengthening supplements. "Boy, I heard about the horse they gave you. Don't waste your money in vain. That animal has already given what it had to give." "I decide where I spend my money," Tyler replied firmly, "and Windrunner deserves a chance." The man sighed, handing over the products. "Well, if you're determined, take this too." He placed a smaller jar on the counter. "It's a special ointment for tendons. If his problem is what I think it is, you'll need it." That small gesture of kindness lit a flame in Tyler's heart. Perhaps he wasn't as alone as he thought. Upon returning home, he found old Joe talking with Mrs. Connie. The old man was holding an ancient book on equine care and some herbs from his own yard. "These are for a tea that helps with circulation," explained the old man. "My father taught me, and his father before him. It's ancient knowledge, but it works." Throughout that week, Tyler dedicated every free minute to the horse. He would get up earlier to apply the medications, massage the injured leg with the ointment, and prepare the herbal tea that old Joe had taught him. After work, he would brush the neglected coat and talk to the animal, telling stories, sharing dreams. Gradually, Windrunner began to respond, a head movement, a more attentive look, a voluntary approach when Tyler arrived. On Friday, upon returning from work, Tyler found something unexpected. A young woman was in his backyard, kneeling beside Windrunner. She had brown hair tied in a disheveled bun and wore simple but elegant clothes. Her hands gently touched the neck of the animal, which seemed strangely comfortable with her presence. "Who are you? What are you doing on my property?" asked Tyler, surprised and suspicious. The young woman stood up quickly, revealing green eyes brimming with tears. "I'm sorry for the intrusion. I'm Melissa Miller. I heard rumors in town about Windrunner." Tyler's heart raced. Melissa Miller, the daughter of Helen, the horse's former owner. The missing piece of the puzzle was beginning to fit. "So it's true," she continued, approaching the horse again. "It really is him. I would recognize this white mark on his neck anywhere. He was my mother's favorite horse. Old Joe told me about your mother and Windrunner." "I'm sorry for your loss," said Tyler, noticing the young woman's genuine emotion. Melissa wiped away a tear. "For years I believed my father had sold him after her passing. It was too painful but understandable. Yesterday, however, I heard in town that Thomas Anderson had given an old horse to an employee. When I heard the animal's name, I couldn't believe it. How did Windrunner end up in the Andersons' hands? Questioned Tyler. That's the part I recently discovered, and that brought me here, replied Melissa, her voice breaking. My father didn't sell him. He gave him to Thomas right after my mother's funeral, asking only that they take good care of him. For my father, Windrunner was too painful a reminder, but Thomas, he simply relegated the animal to oblivion in a distant stable. When I found out, I confronted my father. He didn't know what had happened. He believed Windrunner was being well cared for. Tyler observed the interaction between Melissa and the horse. There was an evident connection, as if both shared memories of a happier time. I brought some special medications, she said, showing a bag she was carrying, and also this. She took out a small brush with a carved wooden handle from the bag. It was the brush my mother used on him. She said it was a sacred ritual between them. At that moment, something extraordinary happened. Windrunner, who could barely move with ease, approached Melissa, resting his muzzle on her shoulder in a gesture that resembled an embrace. The young woman hugged the horse's neck, letting tears flow freely. I promised my mother on her deathbed that I would always take care of him, sobbed Melissa. I feel like I failed her all these years. You didn't know, consoled Tyler, but now you're here, it's not too late. Melissa wiped away her tears and faced Tyler with renewed determination. I want to help with his recovery. I have knowledge of horsemanship and access to resources that might be useful. If you'll allow me, I'll come every day. Tyler hesitated. He knew that Melissa belonged to a different world from his, daughter of a respected businessman, probably a college student, with a comfortable life in the city. He was just the washerwoman's son, struggling to survive with the little he had. Why do you care so much? You barely know me. I'm not doing this for you, she responded frankly. I'm doing it for him, for my mother, and for myself. I need to correct this mistake, you understand. It's a debt I carry. There was sincerity in her words. Tyler nodded, extending his hand. Partners, then? Melissa shook his hand with surprising firmness. Partners. That night, after Melissa left with the promise to return the next day, Tyler sat beside Windrunner, reflecting on the unexpected events. The horse seemed more alive, as if the reunion with Melissa had awakened something dormant within him. You know, Windrunner, maybe there's hope for both of us, murmured Tyler, caressing the animal's neck. You have a story to tell, and now we have someone who can help us rewrite it. From afar in the main house, Mrs. Connie observed her son through the window. A mother's heart recognized the signs. There was a different gleam in Tyler's eyes, a determination she hadn't seen since before her husband's passing. That mistreated horse and the mysterious young woman had brought something that money couldn't buy, a purpose. The next morning, even before the sun rose, Tyler was awakened by knocks on the door. It was Melissa, carrying a box with veterinary equipment and accompanied by a middle-aged man with a professional appearance. This is Dr. Robert, a veterinarian specialized in horses. He agreed to examine Windrunner before opening his clinic. Today, Tyler blinked, confused by the rapidity of events but deeply grateful. As the veterinarian meticulously examined the horse, explaining each procedure, a certainty grew in the young man's heart. Fate had woven those encounters for a reason, greater than all of them. The summer festival race was only 6 weeks away, an impossible goal for any rational person. But that morning, under the watchful eye of a renowned veterinarian, a determined young woman, and a horse that was beginning to rediscover its essence, the impossible gained a new meaning. The following days transformed into an intense and meticulous routine. Dr. Robert's diagnosis had been a mix of hope and realism. Windrunner suffered from an old tendon injury, worsened by years of neglect, but with proper treatment, he could regain a significant part of his movements. As for the race, the veterinarian warned, it's an extremely ambitious goal. I don't promise miracles. Tyler, however, saw in the doctor's cautious words the confirmation that it wasn't impossible. The impossible he knew well. It was what everyone had said about his own life since he was born. With the discreet financial support from Melissa, who insisted on calling it a shared investment, they established a recovery plan. Tyler asked for leave from his job at the Andersons' ranch, which immediately generated rumors in town. To survive, he began doing small carpentry jobs he had learned from his father, working mainly in the early morning hours and at night, dedicating entire afternoons to Windrunner. Old Joe became a valuable mentor. The old man knew ancient rehabilitation techniques that combined specific massages with the application of medicinal herbs. "This isn't in modern books," explained the old man, "but my grandfather, who treated horses during the Civil War, swore by these methods." On one of these afternoons, while applying a warm compress to Windrunner's leg, Old Joe shared an observation. "Did you know that in the first days when you brought him, he barely looked at the sky? He kept his head down all the time. Today I noticed that he followed the flight of a bird for almost a minute. It might seem small, but for an animal that lost hope, it's the beginning of a return." Melissa came religiously every afternoon after her classes at the veterinary school in Louisville, the nearest big city. She brought books, equipment, and most importantly, stories about her mother and Windrunner in their days of glory. "My mother used to say that he didn't run just with his legs, but with his heart," she recounted once, while brushing the animal's coat, which was beginning to regain some shine. She believed there was a secret language between horses and humans, a communication that went beyond commands and responses. "And do you believe that?" asked Tyler, observing the delicacy with which she treated the animal. "I believed it as a child. Then when I entered college, I learned about animal behavior, conditioning, response to stimuli, the science behind everything. But now," she paused, looking into Windrunner's eyes, "now I'm not so sure. There's something here that transcends scientific explanations." The relationship between Tyler and Melissa evolved slowly, between conversations about the horse and comfortable silences shared during treatments. They came from different worlds, but found in caring for Windrunner a common territory, where social differences seemed to fade. On a particularly hot afternoon, Tyler decided it was time to try something new. He put a light halter on Windrunner and with extreme care led him out of the yard for a short walk to the nearby creek. "Do you think it's wise?" questioned Melissa, concerned. "He needs to rediscover the world beyond these four fences," replied Tyler. "Besides, the cool water from the creek might help with muscle recovery." The 200-meter journey was slow and cautious. Windrunner hesitated with each unfamiliar step, but there was a renewed curiosity in his movements. Upon reaching the creek's edge, the horse sniffed the running water, touched it with his muzzle, and, to everyone's surprise, entered slowly, until the water covered part of his legs. "It's amazing," whispered Melissa. "He's choosing the therapy on his own." Tyler nodded, moved. "I think he knows what he needs. Perhaps he always knew." That moment at the creek became part of the daily routine. Each day, Windrunner advanced a little more, stayed a little longer. His gait, though still limping, gradually gained firmness. In the third week after Windrunner's arrival, Tyler made a bold decision. After consulting Dr. Robert and receiving cautious consent, he prepared a small enclosure on a flat piece of land near the house, with the help of neighbors who, curious about the story of the rescued horse, offered growing support. "It's time to start light training," he announced to Melissa. "Not for running yet, but to re-establish muscle and confidence." On the first day of training, a small audience formed discreetly. Besides Old Joe and Mrs. Connie, some neighborhood children and 2 or 3 curious onlookers observed from a distance. Tyler led Windrunner to the enclosure and with smooth movements began guiding him in slow circles. The horse responded with initial hesitation, but soon found its own rhythm. It wasn't the majestic gallop of yesteryear, but there was dignity in each conscious step. After 15 minutes, Tyler ended the session, not wanting to demand too much. "It was an excellent start," commented Melissa, checking the animal's legs, to ensure there was no inflammation. The watching children approached timidly, asking to touch the horse. With Tyler's approval, one by one, they caressed Windrunner's coat, who remained surprisingly calm with the attention. "Was he really a champion?" asked a boy of about 8 years. "Yes, one of the greatest," replied Melissa, "and he can be again." "When will he race again?" questioned another child. Tyler exchanged a look with Melissa before answering, "In the summer festival race, if All goes well. The news spread through town like wildfire. By the end of that week, the miracle of the rescued horse was the predominant topic in conversations. Some ridiculed the idea, others silently rooted for the improbable. Richard Anderson, upon hearing about Tyler's plans, made a point of passing by the training area to mock personally. "So it's true, you're going to enter that lame mule in the summer festival race?" he taunted, accompanied by two equally arrogant friends. "Perhaps we should create a special category, horses on the brink of death." Tyler controlled the anger bubbling in his chest. "Mocking others only reveals the size of your own fear, Richard." "Fear of a reject like that, please?" Richard laughed, but there was a shadow of unease in his gaze. "I'll make a public bet. If that horse finishes the race, I'm not even talking about winning, just finishing, I'll donate $10,000 to the charity of your choice." "And see if he wins?" asked Tyler, surprising himself with the boldness. Richard guffawed. "If that specter wins the race, which is as likely as snow in the Mojave Desert in midsummer, I'll give you my own horse, Black Lightning." "Is it a deal?" Tyler extended his hand. "It's a deal." After the departure of Richard and his cronies, Melissa faced Tyler with a worried expression. "Do you realize what you just did? Black Lightning is the best horse in the region, absolute. Favorite for the race. Richard would never risk losing him if he believed there was the slightest possibility of that happening." "Exactly," replied Tyler with an enigmatic smile. "He underestimates Windrunner because he only sees the exterior. He can't see the heart." In the following weeks, the training gradually intensified. Windrunner progressed each day. His trot became firmer, his breathing more controlled, his gaze more alive. The neighborhood children became regular visitors, bringing carrots and apples as gifts, telling stories to the horse as if he could understand every word. On a particularly significant afternoon, a month after the beginning of the journey, Tyler made a courageous decision. After the usual exercise, he asked everyone to step away from the enclosure. With calculated movements, he positioned himself beside Windrunner and for the first time mounted the animal. There was a moment of absolute tension. The horse remained motionless, as if processing this new experience. Then, slowly, it began to move. Cautious steps at first, then more confident. Tyler maintained minimal contact, allowing the animal to find its own balance. It wasn't a gallop, not even a complete trot, but there was music in that hesitant dance between man and animal. Silent tears ran down Melissa's face as she observed the scene, remembering her mother proudly riding the same horse years before. Upon dismounting, Tyler hugged Windrunner's neck, whispering words of gratitude. At that moment, they were no longer just a humble young man and a discarded horse. They were partners, united by something that transcended logical explanations. "I think we're ready for the next level," said Tyler to Melissa, while the children applauded enthusiastically around the enclosure. The summer festival race was now just 3 weeks away. The impossible was beginning to seem merely improbable, and for someone who had lived in the shadow of others' expectations his entire life, that difference meant everything. The news about Windrunner's progress and the bet between Tyler and Richard Anderson circulated throughout Clear Springs. What had begun as a cause for mockery was gradually transforming into a story of overcoming that captured the imagination of the small town. People who had never exchanged more than formal greetings with Tyler now stopped to ask about the horse, some offering help with special feed or training tips. On a particularly promising morning, Tyler woke before dawn with a sense of renewed optimism. There were exactly 17 days until the race, and Windrunner was showing remarkable progress. His leg, though still marked by old scars, now supported longer trots. The shine had returned to his eyes, and his upright posture reminded of the glory days described by Melissa. Tyler headed to the small improvised stable, eager to begin the training scheduled for that day, the first complete gallop around the larger enclosure, built with the help of volunteers the previous weekend. He opened the stable door and his heart stopped for an instant. Windrunner was lying down, breathing with difficulty, a layer of sweat covering his trembling body. "Windrunner!" Tyler ran to the animal's side, touching his hot neck. The horse tried to get up at recognizing the young man, but fell back down, a groan of pain escaping from his throat. "Hold on, friend, I'll get help." With trembling hands, Tyler called Dr. Robert, describing the symptoms with a voice broken by panic. The veterinarian promised to arrive in 20 minutes. Next, he called Melissa, who answered still sleepy, but woke immediately upon hearing the urgency in Tyler's voice. The minutes that followed seemed eternal. Tyler remained by Windrunner's side, wetting his forehead with cool water, whispering words of encouragement that seemed empty in the face of the animal's visible suffering. Dr. Robert arrived first, followed closely by Melissa. The veterinarian examined Windrunner with professional meticulousness, while Tyler and Melissa observed in anguished silence. Severe equine colic, he finally diagnosed, opening his bag to prepare medications. It's not uncommon in recovering horses, especially those who have gone through periods of malnutrition followed by richer feeding. Will he be all right? Tyler's voice was barely above a whisper. Dr. Robert hesitated, carefully choosing his words. Colic can be very dangerous for horses. We'll medicate him and monitor over the next 24 hours. If he responds well to treatment. He left the sentence unfinished, the silence communicating the gravity of the situation. The day transformed into a painful vigil. Dr. Robert applied medications to alleviate the pain and reduce inflammation, inserted a nasogastric tube to relieve stomach pressure, and instructed Tyler and Melissa on how to monitor the animal's vital signs. After a few hours, he needed to leave to attend to other emergencies, promising to return at nightfall. Melissa remained by Tyler's side, both sitting on the stable floor, observing every movement of Windrunner. At a certain point, she took the young man's hand between hers, a simple gesture that conveyed more support than any words could. "He's strong," she murmured. "Stronger than we imagine." By evening, Windrunner seemed a bit more stable, but still far from being out of danger. Dr. Robert returned as promised, performing a new, complete examination. "There's a small improvement," he announced, to the partial relief of the young people. "But we need to continue the intensive treatment. The next 48 hours will be decisive." It was during this conversation that Old Joe appeared at the stable door, accompanied by 3 of the children who usually visited Windrunner. The old man held a small clay pot with a dark, aromatic paste. "I brought something that might help," he said, approaching with cautious steps. "It's a preparation of herbs that my grandfather used for equine colic. It doesn't replace the doctor's medicines, but it can complement them." Dr. Robert examined the contents of the pot with initial skepticism, but after smelling the mixture, nodded with respect. "Arnica, wild chamomile, and some other herbs I don't immediately identify. There's no contraindication with the current treatment. Worth trying." The children approached the horse, depositing small, colorful drawings they had made. "To make him feel better," explained the smallest one, with the simple and powerful logic of childhood. Night fell over Clear Springs. Mrs. Connie brought coffee and homemade bread for Tyler and Melissa, insisting they eat. "You don't help the horse if you get sick too," she warned with maternal firmness. Around 10 at night, Windrunner had a significant worsening. His breathing became more laborious and tremors ran through his large body. Tyler felt a growing despair taking hold of his chest. "Maybe," began Melissa with a breaking voice, "maybe we should consider what's best for him, if the suffering is too much." "No." Tyler's response was harsher than he intended. "I'm sorry, but no. He didn't give up when everyone abandoned him. We won't give up on him now." They spent the entire night alternating in care, applying cold compresses to lower the temperature, administering small amounts of water, monitoring every change. In the darkest hours of the night, while Melissa dozed off leaning against a pile of hay, Tyler approached Windrunner's ear. "I don't know if you can understand me," he whispered, "but I need you to fight, not just for the race or for the bet, but because you taught me something about dignity, about not accepting the fate that others determine for us. Please don't go." The next morning, Dr. Robert returned to find a stabilized condition. There was no significant improvement, but neither was there worsening. "It's a good sign," he commented cautiously. "He's fighting." That afternoon, as Tyler applied Old Joe's herbal paste to the horse's gums as instructed, Richard Anderson unexpectedly appeared in the yard, accompanied by two unknown men of official appearance. "I heard about the misfortune," said Richard with false sympathy. "I came to check on the competitor's condition." Tyler stood up, facing his rival with distrust. "What do you really want here, Richard?" "Just to ensure that everyone is aware of the rules," he replied, gesturing to the men beside him. "These are representatives of the race organizing committee. They came to inform that all participating horses must be registered and pass a preliminary inspection 5 days from now." The men confirmed the information, handing Tyler an official form. "The animal needs to demonstrate minimum conditions of health and fitness to be qualified," explained one of them. 5 days, murmured Tyler, looking at Windrunner, still lying down and debilitated. Richard smiled with barely disguised satisfaction. "Apparently fate decided our bet even before the race. A pity, really. It was a moving story." After the visitor's departure, Tyler sat on the improvised bench outside the stable, the crumpled form between his tense fingers. Melissa sat beside him, silent for a few minutes. "Maybe it's a sign," she finally said. "Windrunner has already proven his worth just by having come this far. Nobody expected him to survive when you brought him. Each day with him is a victory against expectations." "Are you suggesting we give up?" asked Tyler, the disappointment evident in his voice. "I'm suggesting we think about his well-being above all. The race was always an almost impossible goal. Now, with this colic—" "I can't give up," interrupted Tyler, a fierce determination in his eyes. "It's not just about the race or proving something to Richard and the others. It's about completing this journey we started together. If we give up now, we're confirming what everyone has said from the beginning, that he's just an old, useless horse, that I'm just the washerwoman's son dreaming too big." Melissa observed Tyler for a long moment, recognizing the depth of the bond formed between him and Windrunner. "Then we won't give up," she finally said, "but we need to be realistic about the chances and above all respect his limits." The following 3 days were a silent and exhausting battle. Gradually, Windrunner began to show signs of recovery. He managed to stand for longer periods, accepted small amounts of liquid food, responded with more vigor to stimuli. Dr. Robert, in his daily visit, showed cautious optimism. On the eve of the preliminary inspection, Tyler spent the entire night in the stable. Windrunner was now standing, although visibly weaker than before the crisis. The leg injury, which had shown significant improvement in previous weeks, now seemed more pronounced again due to days of forced immobility. "I don't know if we'll pass the inspection tomorrow," Tyler confessed to Melissa the next morning, as they prepared Windrunner, brushing his coat with extra care. "But we need to try." The path to the inspection center, specially set up for the occasion in the town center, was slow and painful. Windrunner walked with visible difficulty, each step seeming a monumental effort. People stopped to observe, some with genuine concern, others with morbid curiosity, few with real hope. In line for the inspection, Richard and his friends didn't miss the opportunity to taunt. "It should be considered animal cruelty to bring a creature in this state," he commented loudly enough to be heard by everyone around. When it was finally Windrunner's turn, the official veterinarian, a middle-aged man with a severe expression, examined the animal with impartial thoroughness. His face revealed no emotion as he checked vital signs, verified the injured leg, observed posture and movements. Finally, he looked at Tyler with professional seriousness. "I'm sorry, young man. This animal is not in condition to compete. It would be irresponsible and potentially dangerous to allow its participation." The world seemed to slow down around Tyler. He heard Richard's laughter in the background, saw Melissa's compassionate expression, felt the weight of failure on his shoulders. All the effort, all the hopes, all the small daily miracles now seemed a cruel illusion. "I understand," he responded mechanically, holding Windrunner's reins tightly as if the animal might disappear if he let go. The way back home was made in absolute silence. Not even the children who anxiously awaited news dared to ask when they saw the devastated expressions of Tyler and Melissa. That night, alone in the stable, Tyler faced the question that echoed in his mind. Had it been worth it? All the sacrifice, all the emotional investment, or the exposure to ridicule to end like this. Maybe the others had been right from the beginning. Maybe some dreams were too big for people like him. The news of Windrunner's disqualification spread quickly through Clear Springs. For most, it was just confirmation of the obvious, a predictable ending to a story doomed to failure from the start. Visits to the small stable decreased drastically. Even the children who previously appeared daily now passed by from a distance, perhaps by instruction from their parents, perhaps because they didn't know how to deal with the defeat of their unlikely hero. Tyler continued caring for Windrunner with the same dedication, but something had changed. The sparkle in his eyes, the iron determination that had sustained him for weeks, seemed to have been extinguished. He worked mechanically, fulfilling the necessary tasks for the animal's recovery, but without the spark that previously illuminated each gesture. On the morning of the 5th day after the disqualification, Melissa arrived earlier than usual. She brought with her a folder with documents and an expression difficult to decipher, a mixture of anxiety and contained hope. "We need to talk," she said, finding Tyler in the yard as he prepared the mixture of medications for Windrunner. "If it's about selling the horse, the answer is still no," he replied, without raising his eyes from his task. "I've already received 3 offers this week, people who want to buy him as a mascot or case study. He's not for sale." "It's not about selling," Melissa took a deep breath. "It's about fighting." Tyler finally looked at her, confused. Melissa opened the folder and took out an official document with the stamp of the American Horse Breeders Association. "I've spent the last few days researching the race regulations. I read every line, every footnote, every historical precedent." She pointed to a specific paragraph. "Here, there's an appeal clause that allows challenging the disqualification decision through the presentation of independent assessments and expert testimonies." "But the official veterinarian followed standard protocol," interrupted Melissa, her voice gaining firmness. "But the regulations also provide for special considerations for extraordinary cases. And if there's something extraordinary in this story, it's Windrunner." A small spark reignited in Tyler's eyes. "Even if we get the appeal, he's still recovering from colic. I don't know if he'll be in condition. Let's think one day at a time," said Melissa, placing her hand on Tyler's arm. "First, let's fight for his right to participate. Then we'll decide if he should race or not." Hope, even timid, was a strange feeling after days of resignation. Tyler nodded slowly. "What do we need to do?" "First, we need independent assessments. I've already spoken with Dr. Robert. He agreed to provide a detailed opinion on Windrunner's evolution since we started treatment. I've also contacted 2 professors from my college, specialists in equine rehabilitation. If we can convince them to come examine Windrunner—" "How would we pay for that?" Tyler interrupted, financial reality always present in his concerns. Melissa hesitated. "My father offered help." "Your father?" Tyler stepped back, surprised. "The same man who allowed Windrunner to be discarded like garbage after your mother's death?" "He didn't know what had happened to Windrunner," defended Melissa, although her voice betrayed some doubt. "When he learned the truth, when he saw my involvement in this story, something changed in him. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's an attempt to redeem himself, I'm not sure exactly. But he wants to help." Tyler remained silent, processing the information. The idea of accepting help from the man who, directly or indirectly, had contributed to Windrunner's suffering caused a deep internal conflict. "I'm not asking you to forgive him," continued Melissa. "I'm just suggesting that we accept the support we need from wherever it comes. For Windrunner." Before Tyler could respond, they were interrupted by a knock at the gate. To their surprise, it was Edward Miller, Melissa's father. A tall man, with graying hair and formal posture, he seemed out of place in that simple environment. His eyes, however, revealed genuine emotion when they landed on the stable where Windrunner rested. "Sorry for the intrusion," he said, approaching, with hesitant steps. "Melissa told me she would be here this morning. I came to offer my help personally." Tyler studied the man before him, the respected businessman, widower of the woman who had loved Windrunner like a son. There was pain in his gaze, an old and poorly healed pain. "Why now?" asked Tyler directly. "Why care after so long?" Edward Miller didn't avert his gaze. "Because I made a mistake. After the departure of Helen, my wife, I couldn't bear anything that reminded me of her. Windrunner was too special. Each time I saw him, it was like losing her again." His voice faltered momentarily. "I believed Thomas Anderson, being a respected breeder, would take good care of him. It was a cowardly decision. I know that now." The man took a few more steps, approaching the stable. "May I see him?" After a moment of hesitation, Tyler nodded. The three entered the small shelter where Windrunner rested on a fresh bed of straw. The horse raised his head upon perceiving the presence of strangers, his eyes fixing on the newcomer with a disconcerting intensity. Edward Miller stopped a few steps away, a visible emotion crossing his face. "He looks so much like... in those days." He couldn't complete the sentence. He approached slowly, extending a trembling hand towards the horse. To Tyler and Melissa's surprise, Windrunner didn't back away. On the contrary, he stretched his neck, gently touching Edward's fingers with his muzzle. A gesture so delicate, so laden with meaning, that the man couldn't contain his tears. "Helen always said he could see into people's souls," murmured Edward, caressing the animal's neck with reverence, "that he knew who deserved a second chance." After a few minutes of emotion-laden silence, Edward turned to Tyler with renewed determination. "Melissa told me about the disqualification and the possibility of appeal. I want to help not just financially, but with all the resources at my disposal. I have contacts on the organizing committee. I can ensure the case is analyzed fairly." "Why?" asked Tyler again, still suspicious. "Because Helen believed in second chances," replied Edward simply, "and because this horse means more to our family's history than you can imagine." At that moment, Windrunner softly neighed and tried to stand. Up! With a visible effort, he managed to stand completely, firmer than in previous days. There was a new energy in his posture, as if Edward's presence had awakened dormant memories. "There's something you need to know," said Edward, observing the animal's reaction. "Something I've kept secret all these years, which might explain why Windrunner was so special to Helen." He took a deep breath before continuing. "This horse wasn't just bought or bred by her. Helen saved him when he was just an injured colt, abandoned after a fire that destroyed a neighboring farm. The veterinarians said he wouldn't survive the night, that it was cruel to keep him alive." Melissa looked at her father, surprised. "You never told me this." Helen spent 3 days and 3 nights by his side, without sleeping, feeding him with a syringe, applying compresses, continuously talking to him. Edward smiled at the memory. On the 4th day, the colt stood up. The veterinarians called it a miracle. Helen called it stubbornness. Tyler approached Windrunner, touching his neck with new understanding. "So this isn't the first time he's defied expectations." "Not the second, nor the third," confirmed Edward. "When he started competing, the experts said his body wasn't ideal for racing, that his legs were too thin, that his chest didn't have the necessary lung capacity." Helen just smiled. "It's not anatomy that wins races," she would say. "It's heart." An idea began to form in Tyler's mind, not just a strategy for the appeal, but a deeper understanding of what was really at stake in that story. "Mr. Miller, do you have records from those early years? Documents, photos, anything that proves this story of overcoming from the beginning?" Edward nodded. "I have everything saved." Helen kept detailed diaries about his development, veterinary records, newspaper clippings of the first improbable victories. "It's all in a box that I haven't had the courage to open since she left us." "Now is the time," said Melissa, holding her father's hand gently. "It's time to open the box." That same afternoon, in the modest living room of Tyler's house, the three poured over the contents of the box brought by Edward. Yellowed photographs showed a skeletal colt gradually transforming into a majestic horse. Newspaper clippings reported the surprising victories, and most valuable of all, the diaries written by Helen herself, detailing each stage of treatment, each challenge overcome, each moment of doubt followed by unexpected advances. "This is more than enough for the appeal," concluded Melissa, organizing the most relevant documents. "It's proof that Windrunner isn't just an ordinary horse facing difficulties, but a survivor whose entire story is based on overcoming the impossible." Tyler then realized that there was something bigger at stake than a simple race. It was about honoring a legacy, completing a circle that had begun many years before. Helen had saved Windrunner when everyone considered him lost. Now, in some mysterious way, he was uniting people to complete a journey interrupted by loss. Upon returning to the stable that night, Tyler found Windrunner standing, observing the moonlight through the small window. There was a new dignity in his posture, as if the animal also understood that the pieces of a larger puzzle were beginning to fit together. "I think it was always about this, wasn't it?" murmured Tyler, approaching to caress the horse's neck. "Not about proving something to others, but about completing something that began long before us." Windrunner turned his head, looking directly at Tyler. And at that moment, the young man was absolutely certain that regardless of the outcome of the appeal or the race, they were already victorious, in a way that transcended any trophy or public recognition. The appeal hearing was scheduled for 3 days before the race, a date that generated both relief and apprehension. On one hand, there would be enough time to prepare Windrunner if the decision was favorable. On the other, the tight deadline made every hour of recovery extremely precious. Edward Miller fulfilled his promise, mobilizing resources and contacts. An internationally renowned specialist in equine rehabilitation was brought from Chicago, while Dr. Robert prepared a detailed report on the animal's clinical evolution. Helen's diaries were chronologically organized, highlighting the parallels between Windrunner's current recovery and his first overcoming as a colt. While the bureaucratic part advanced, Tyler focused on the physical recovery of the horse. Following the specialist's guidance, he established a gradual routine of light exercises, short walks, hydrotherapy in the creek, specific massages. Windrunner responded positively, each day showing a little more strength and balance. The eve of the hearing brought an unexpected visit to the modest stable. Thomas Anderson in person, without the usual company of henchmen or his arrogant son. The wealthy rancher seemed uncomfortable, out of place in that simple environment. "I heard about the appeal," he said after formal greetings. "I came to see the horse." Tyler led him to the stable with evident distrust. Thomas observed Windrunner in silence for a few minutes, his face revealing a mixture of surprise and something that could be interpreted as remorse. "I never imagined," he finally murmured. "When Edward gave me this animal, he just said he couldn't look at him anymore. I assumed it was an ordinary horse without special value, and that would justify the abandonment?" questioned Tyler, unable to contain his indignation. "Leaving him to waste away until near death?" Thomas didn't immediately respond. He ran his hand over Windrunner's coat, now considerably more lustrous than weeks ago. "I came to make a proposal," he finally said. "Withdraw the appeal and I will pay double the race prize. No humiliations, no risks for the animal." The offer caught Tyler by surprise. It was a considerable amount. Enough money to solve many financial problems, perhaps even buy a small property. "Why?" he asked, suspicious. "My son is obsessed with this race. It's his last year competing before taking on greater responsibilities in the family business. I want to ensure that nothing complicates his victory." Tyler felt a wave of indignation growing in his chest. "Are you trying to buy what you couldn't intimidate? Do you think everything has a price?" "Be reasonable, boy," insisted Thomas, his voice hardening. "This animal has already proven its worth to you and whoever else matters. Why risk everything in a race that could end in tragedy? If you push him beyond the limit—" "The hearing will take place tomorrow," interrupted Tyler. "If the experts determine that Windrunner is not in condition, I will accept the decision, but I won't give up for money." Thomas studied the young man for a moment, as if reassessing his determination. "You remind me of Helen Miller, the same irrational stubbornness." He walked to the exit, but stopped before crossing the door. "Think about the horse, not just your own redemption. Sometimes the greatest proof of love is knowing when to stop. Thomas's words remained with Tyler throughout the night, mixing with his own fears and doubts. Was he really thinking about Windrunner's well-being, or just projecting his own frustrated ambitions onto him? The morning of the hearing arrived with a fine, persistent rain. Tyler woke after a night of restless sleep, filled with nightmares where Windrunner fell during the race, where crowds laughed at his presumption, where Helen Miller's accusatory gaze pursued him for having pushed her beloved horse beyond the limits. The hearing was held in a room annexed to the town hall. 3 judges comprised the special committee: the official veterinarian of the competition, a representative of the Breeders' Association, and a retired judge known for his impartiality. The formal environment intimidated Tyler, who had never been in a similar situation. Edward Miller conducted the initial presentation with the fluency of someone accustomed to high-level negotiations. The experts presented their reports, emphasizing Windrunner's remarkable recovery and his previous history of overcoming. Helen's diaries were cited, visibly moving some of those present. When the time came for the counter-argument, Richard Anderson took the floor, representing his father's interests. "All this is very moving," he said with barely disguised sarcasm. "A story worthy of a movie. But we're talking about an official competition, not charity. If we make exceptions based on emotional stories, what will be the next step? Allowing any animal in questionable conditions to participate because it has a special story?" The argument, although cynical, had its logic. Tyler noticed looks of agreement among some committee members. "Besides," continued Richard, I know what's really at stake here. A reckless bet made by someone who had nothing to lose. Are we really willing to risk the integrity of an animal just to satisfy the ego and ambition of an amateur handler?" The words hit Tyler like physical blows. Worse than that, they contained a grain of truth that he himself had difficulty confronting. Indeed, there was a bet involved. Indeed, part of his motivation was to prove something to others, and to himself. When he finally had the opportunity to speak, Tyler felt his throat dry, and the words scrambling in his mind. He had prepared a speech with Melissa, but now everything seemed artificial, rehearsed. He began, hesitant. "I could talk about Windrunner's impressive recovery, about how each specialist was surprised by his evolution. I could cite numbers, improvement, rates, comparisons with other cases. But that would be using the same cold language that reduced him to a disposable object when he no longer met the standards of utility." Tyler took a deep breath, completely abandoning the planned speech. "The truth is that I began this journey out of wounded pride. When I received Windrunner as a joke, I wanted to prove they were wrong. About him, about me, about what people like us can achieve. And yes, I made a foolish bet, driven by that same pride." The room remained in absolute silence. Melissa gave him a concerned look, but Tyler continued. "But something changed over these weeks. I learned that Windrunner doesn't need to win a race to prove his worth. He has already defeated abandonment, disease, oblivion. Each dawn he rises is a victory against everything they tried to reduce his existence to." Tyler paused, gathering courage for what he would say next. "If you determine that he should not compete, I will accept the decision without question. Because I learned from Windrunner that dignity is not in forcing limits, but in accepting that some limits exist for a reason." A heavy silence filled the room after his words. The committee withdrew for deliberation, leaving Tyler, Melissa, and Edward in tense waiting. "It was a beautiful speech," commented Edward. "Helen would have been proud." "It was honest," replied Tyler, feeling a strange weight in his chest, as if something was simultaneously crumbling and rebuilding inside him. The weight seemed endless. When the committee finally returned, their expressions were indecipherable. The retired judge, who presided over the session, took the floor. "This case presented us with a significant dilemma. On one hand, we have established rules to ensure the welfare of animals and the integrity of the competition. On the other, we have exceptional circumstances that deserve special consideration." Tyler firmly held Melissa's hand, preparing for any outcome. After careful analysis of the technical reports and considering the unique history of this animal, the committee has decided that Windrunner may participate in the race, conditioned on a final evaluation on the morning of the event. If he shows any sign of discomfort or regression in his recovery, the permission will be immediately revoked. A mix of relief and new anxiety took hold of Tyler. They had gotten the chance, but with it came an even greater responsibility. As they left the town hall, they found a small group of people waiting. Old Joe, Mrs. Connie, the neighborhood, children and even some residents who had initially mocked the project. Spontaneous applause arose when they learned of the result. Melissa hugged Tyler enthusiastically. "We did it. Now we just need to keep him stable until race day." But Tyler didn't fully share the euphoria. Something in Thomas Anderson's words, and in his own reflection during the hearing, had planted a seed of doubt that was now rapidly growing. That night, after everyone had left, Tyler sat alone in the stable, observing Windrunner sleep. The horse seemed peaceful, oblivious to the human decisions that would determine his fate. "Am I doing the right thing?" whispered Tyler to the silence of the night. "What if I'm risking everything we've gained just out of pride? What if you get hurt again, this time because of me?" The responsibility weighed like never before. It was no longer a question of proving something to the Andersons or to the town. It was about the life of a being who had trusted him, who had found dignity again under his care. For the first time since receiving Windrunner, Tyler seriously considered giving up, not for money or threats, but out of love. Perhaps the true victory was recognizing when to stop, accepting that not all battles need to be fought to the end. The tears he had contained throughout the journey finally found freedom, silently running down his face as he caressed Windrunner's sleeping neck. Indecision tore at his heart. Each possible scenario seemed laden with risks and potential regrets. "What should I do?" he asked the emptiness of the night, without expecting an answer. Dawn found him still awake, divided between the dream that had driven him this far and the fear of transforming it into a nightmare through excessive ambition. Daybreak found Tyler still in the stable, exhausted from the sleepless night, but with a strange calm that follows great emotional storms. The decision that had so tormented him had not really been made, at least not consciously. It was as if he was waiting for a sign, a certainty that didn't come from logical arguments or probability calculations. Windrunner woke and immediately looked for Tyler, approaching with that silent dignity that had become his trademark. The young man offered fresh water and a portion of oats, enriched with the recommended supplements. Observing each movement of the animal with the attentive eyes of someone looking for answers in small details. "Good morning," said Melissa, entering the stable with 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to Tyler and studied his tired face. "You didn't sleep." It wasn't a question, but a statement. Tyler accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "I'm thinking of withdrawing from the race," he finally said, the words coming out with difficulty, as if each one weighed tons. Melissa showed no surprise, just nodded slowly. "What made you reach that conclusion?" "Fear," replied Tyler with raw honesty. "Fear that we're risking everything we've achieved just to prove a point. What if he gets seriously hurt? What if we lose everything we've recovered so far?" "It's a real risk," agreed Melissa, without trying to dissuade him. "What do you think your mother would say?" The question caught Tyler by surprise. Mrs. Connie had followed the journey with that characteristic mixture of maternal concern and silent support. "She would probably tell me to follow my heart," he replied after a moment of reflection. "But she would also remind me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it." "And Helen, what do you think she would say?" continued Melissa, referring to the mother she had never personally known, but whose presence permeated every aspect of that story. Tyler looked at Windrunner, who was observing them with unusual attention, as if understanding the weight of the conversation. "I think she would say to trust the horse, to let him decide." A contemplative silence enveloped the three. Eventually, Melissa broke it with a practical suggestion. "Let's take him to the training field today, not for a speed or endurance test, but to feel how he responds. If we notice any sign of discomfort or hesitation, we'll have our answer." The proposal made sense. It was a compromise between premature withdrawal and blind obstinacy, an opportunity for Windrunner to speak through his actions. They walked slowly to the field, maintaining a comfortable pace for the animal. The news of the conditional approval in the appeal had spread, and small groups formed along the way. Curious looks, some skeptical, others genuinely rooting for the improbable. In the field, they found old Joe already waiting, accompanied by Dr. Robert, who had offered to monitor Windrunner's vital signs during the test. "No pressure," instructed the veterinarian. "Let him establish the rhythm. We're just observing, not demanding." Tyler nodded, putting the halter on Windrunner with delicate movements. They wouldn't use a saddle today. It was a test of disposition, not performance. "Let's go, friend," he murmured, leading the horse to the center of the field. The first steps were cautious, as always. Windrunner still slightly favored the previously injured leg, but in a much less pronounced way than weeks ago. Tyler allowed him to familiarize himself with the terrain, walking in wide circles, without any pressure to accelerate. Gradually, something began to change. Windrunner's posture was subtly altering. His head raised a little more, his ears pointed forward with renewed interest, his steps became firmer. It wasn't just a horse following commands. It was an athlete remembering his purpose. Encouraged by these signs, Tyler slightly increased the pace, moving from a walk to a very gentle trot. Windrunner responded without hesitation, naturally finding a cadence that seemed comfortable. "Impressive," commented Dr. Robert, monitoring the heartbeat and breathing. "Vital signs are stable, no indication of excessive stress." After 20 minutes of gradual exercise, Tyler led Windrunner back to the starting point, where Melissa, old Joe, and the veterinarian were waiting. The horse showed no signs of exhaustion. On the contrary, he seemed more alive, more present than at any moment since his arrival. "I think we have our answer," said Melissa softly. At that exact moment, a luxury car parked near the field. Edward Miller got out, accompanied by an elderly man who walked with difficulty, supported by an ornate cane. "I brought someone who very much wanted to meet you," announced Edward, helping the elderly man approach. "This is Anthony Vaughan," he introduced. "He was Windrunner's trainer during his glory years. He's been retired for almost a decade, but when he heard the story..." The old trainer approached. Windrunner slowly, his teary eyes fixed on the animal. "My old friend," he murmured with a breaking voice. "Who would have thought we would meet again?" Windrunner reacted in an extraordinary way. He moved toward the elderly man with a youthful animation, gently touching his shoulder with his muzzle, in a gesture that seemed both greeting and recognition. "He remembers you," noted Tyler, moved by the scene. "Horses never forget," replied Anthony, caressing the animal's neck with the familiarity of one who knows every inch, especially the exceptional ones. Anthony then turned to Tyler, studying him with the intensity of someone evaluating more than appearances. "Edward told me everything, about how you rescued him, how you fought for him when everyone had given up." The old trainer smiled. "Helen would have liked you." "I came to offer my help for the final preparations," continued Anthony. "If you'll accept an old meddler, of course. I know every peculiarity of this stubborn one here. His strengths, his quirks, the little techniques. That worked in the competition days. The offer was unexpected and valuable. No one knew Windrunner in his prime better than his former trainer." Still, Tyler hesitated, sharing his sincere concern. "I'm in doubt if we should really participate. The risk..." "There's always risk," interrupted Anthony with the frankness of the very old or very wise. "The question isn't whether there's risk, but whether it's worth facing. And this," he continued, gesturing between Tyler and Windrunner, "is worth it." "How can you be so sure?" questioned Tyler. "Because it's not just about a race, my young friend, it never was." Anthony looked significantly at Windrunner. "Helen used to say that some stories need to be completed, no matter how long it takes. This horse didn't come back into your life by chance." The old trainer's words echoed deeply in Tyler, as if verbalizing a truth he already felt intuitively. It wasn't superstition or cheap mysticism. It was the recognition of patterns that transcended coincidences. 2 days, said Anthony. "Give me 2 days with you. If at the end of that time you still feel it's imprudent to compete, I myself will defend the withdrawal. But I think what we'll see will be quite different. And so began the most intense and transformative 48 hours of the journey. Anthony brought not just specific techniques for the final preparation, but mainly a deep understanding of windrunners' unique psychology. He was always sensitive to abrupt changes in weather, he explained while applying a special ointment to the animal's legs. On the eve of the race, make sure to keep him warm if the temperature drops during the night. At another moment, he demonstrated how to correctly position the body when riding him. He prefers a little more weight to the right in the turns. Helen discovered this by chance in the third race. It may seem counterintuitive, but it works specifically with him. The neighborhood children returned, attracted by the renewed energy emanating from the small stable. Anthony incorporated them into the routine, assigning small tasks that made them feel an important part of the process. On the afternoon before the race, as they applied the final treatments, Richard Anderson unexpectedly appeared. This time, he came alone without his usual arrogance. "My father told me about his visit," he said, addressing Tyler, "about the offer you refused." "It wasn't for sale," replied Tyler simply. Richard observed the movement around the stable, the evident dedication of people from different backgrounds united by a common purpose. "You really believe you can win, don't you?" he asked, more curious than disdainful. "I believe we can try with dignity," replied Tyler. "The result is just one part of the story." Richard seemed genuinely confused by this concept, the idea that the process could be as valuable or more valuable than the final result. "The bet still stands," he finally said. "Black Lightning against 10,000 for charity." "It was never about the bet," replied Tyler. As Richard walked away, Anthony approached Tyler. "Did you notice?" "What?" "The fear in his eyes. It's no longer disdain or arrogance, it's genuine fear." Tyler reflected on the observation. It was true. There was something different in Richard's posture, an insecurity that wasn't present in their previous encounters. On the eve of the race, a small crowd gathered spontaneously around Tyler's house. They brought food, drink, music. It was more than a celebration. It was a collective declaration of support. People who had initially mocked now shared stories of how Windrunner's journey had inspired small changes in their own lives. When night fell, Tyler briefly withdrew from the celebration for a private moment with Windrunner. The horse seemed serene, almost solemn, as if understanding the importance of the next day. "Regardless of what happens tomorrow," said Tyler, resting his forehead against the animal's neck, "you've already won. We've all won." That night, he slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Not with the tranquility of someone certain of victory, but with the peace of someone who finally understands that some journeys are worthwhile in themselves, regardless of the final destination. The dawn of race day brought with it a surprisingly clear sky after days of intermittent rain. The first rays of sun illuminated the puddles scattered along the path, creating small golden mirrors. A good omen, thought Tyler, allowing himself a moment of unpretentious hope. The entire town seemed to converge on the improvised racetrack in the Anderson family's fields. The traditional summer festival race was the biggest annual event in Clear Springs, attracting visitors from all over the region. This year, however, there was an additional element of expectation. The story of the rescued horse and the obstinate young man had exceeded the limits of the small town, mentioned even in regional newspapers. While preparing Windrunner with the help of Melissa and Anthony, Tyler felt a strange mixture of nervousness and serenity. Each movement was executed with meticulous precision, the final brushing, the careful placement of equipment, the last adjustments to the halter. "He's ready," Anthony finally said, stepping back to observe the result of his work. And he truly was. Windrunner was no longer the beaten and hopeless animal that Tyler had received on that seemingly distant day. He now stood with restored dignity, his shining coat reflecting the sunlight, his eyes alive and attentive. There was no guarantee of victory, but there was certainty of integrity, and perhaps that was the true triumph. "It's time," announced Melissa, checking her watch. As they walked toward the starting line, where 7 other horses were already Positioned with their respective jockeys, Tyler felt the weight of gazes upon him, some hopeful, others skeptical, many simply curious to witness the outcome of this improbable story of redemption. The improvised racetrack on the Anderson property was buzzing with an energy rarely seen in Clear Springs. Temporary stands accommodated hundreds of spectators, while many others crowded against the fences that marked the course. The announcer introduced the competitors with growing enthusiasm, each name received with applause from their respective supporters. "And finally," announced the announcer, with a dramatic pause, "completing our group of competitors, we have Windrunner, ridden by Tyler Morgan." The crowd's reaction was surprising, a wave of applause and encouraging shouts, much warmer than Tyler could have imagined. Apparently, the story of the rescued horse had touched more hearts than he supposed. Even people who had never exchanged a word with him now shouted his name and Windrunner's. Positioned at the outer edge of the track, Tyler could see the other competitors casting glances in his direction, some of curiosity, others of poorly disguised disdain. Richard Anderson, mounted on his imposing Black Lightning, maintained a studiously neutral expression, although his eyes betrayed an unusual disquiet. In the small space reserved for trainers and assistants, Melissa, Edward, Anthony, and Old Joe formed a united group. Mrs. Connie was in the stands, surrounded by neighborhood children, all holding small, colorful posters with Windrunner's name. "Competitors, prepare yourselves," announced the chief, Judge, raising the flag that would signal the start. Tyler leaned over Windrunner's neck, whispering the words that had become a ritual between them. "Just you and me, friend. The rest is just noise." The bang that marked the start echoed across the field, and the horses shot forward like arrows released from taut bows. Black Lightning immediately took the lead, his powerful gallop creating significant distance in the first 100 meters. The other competitors formed a compact group, disputing positions with calculated intensity. Windrunner started cautiously, not by Tyler's deliberate strategy, but by his own instinct. His rhythm was constant, preserving energy, as if recognizing that the 2-kilometer track would require more than initial explosion. "Windrunner and Tyler are in last position after 400 meters of the race," narrated the announcer, without completely hiding the tone of disappointment. "It seems the inspiring story won't have a happy ending in the competition." Tyler ignored the comment, focusing exclusively on the connection with Windrunner. He could feel the animal's body beneath his. There were no signs of stress or discomfort, just a methodical, almost meditative rhythm. Halfway through the course, when the competitors reached the most distant point of the circular track, the configuration of the race had established itself. Black Lightning maintained the lead with a comfortable margin, followed by two competitors who alternated in second position. The rest of the group, including Windrunner, formed a secondary group, already with no apparent chances of reaching the leaders. It was at this moment that something changed. As they rounded the curve that marked the beginning of the final lap, Windrunner slightly raised his head, his ears pointing forward with new attention. Without any command from Tyler, he began to accelerate, his strides lengthening in a rhythm that surprised even his rider. "Look at that!" exclaimed the announcer, excitement showing in his voice. "Windrunner seems to have found a second wind. He's overtaking the 5th place, now the 4th. The crowd reacted with shouts of renewed enthusiasm. Tyler, initially surprised by the spontaneous acceleration, quickly adjusted his posture to accompany the new rhythm, remembering Anthony's instructions about how to distribute weight in the turns. Unbelievable. Windrunner now overtakes the 3rd place and continues advancing. The announcer's voice could barely keep up with the events on the track. "We are witnessing something extraordinary here in Clear Springs." In the stands, Mrs. Connie was on her feet, silent tears running down her wrinkled face. The children jumped and shouted frenetically, their posters waving in the air like small flags of hope. In the last 400 meters, Windrunner reached 2nd place. His gallop had transformed into something almost hypnotic. It wasn't just raw speed, but a perfect harmony of movements, as if each muscle, each tendon knew exactly when and how to contract. "It's experience," shouted Anthony to no one in particular, but everyone around him. "He remembers. The body remembers." The last 200 meters became the scene of an improbable duel. Black Lightning, alerted by the crowd's shouts, intensified his own rhythm. Under Richard's urgent command, the distance between the two horses diminished with each stride. Black Lightning and Windrunner, the two leaders separated by just a few lengths now. Who would have thought we'd reach this moment? Tyler could see Richard's back in front of him, the distance gradually diminishing. He could feel Windrunner beneath him, each muscle stretched to the maximum, each breath calculated. There was no more pain, no more past, just the present moment, the purity of the race in its most fundamental expression. In the last 50 meters it happened. Windrunner drew level with Black Lightning. For a brief instant, the two horses ran side by side as equals. Richard cast a look of incredulity at Tyler, reluctant recognition mixed with fierce determination. And then, in the final meters, Windrunner advanced. Not with a dramatic last-minute impulse, but with the relentless constancy that had characterized his entire recovery. One step at a time, without hurry, without desperation, just pure purpose. Windrunner crosses the finish line in first. Place? The announcer's voice almost broke with emotion. The impossible has just happened in Clear Springs. The explosion of joy that followed was deafening. People who had never bet on Windrunner now celebrated as if they had believed from the beginning. Strangers hugged each other, united by witnessing something that transcended simple sporting competition. Tyler dismounted with trembling legs, hugging Windrunner's neck, who was breathing heavily, but maintained his head high, his eyes bright with a fully restored life. Melissa ran to them, followed by Edward, Anthony, and Old Joe. Words seemed inadequate, insufficient to capture the magnitude of the moment. As the celebration unfolded, Richard Anderson approached slowly. His face was a complex mask of contradictory emotions. He stopped in front of Tyler, observed Windrunner for a long moment, then extended his hand. "Congratulations," he said simply. "It was deserved." Tyler accepted the gesture, recognizing how much it had cost Richard to pronounce that single word. "Thank you." "About the bet," continued Richard, hesitant. "Black Lightning is yours as agreed." Tyler smiled, surprising everyone with his response. "I don't want your horse, Richard. I never did. But I would like the 10,000 to be donated. To start something I have in mind, a rehabilitation center for abandoned or injured horses, right here in Clear Springs." The proposal caught Richard by surprise. A rehabilitation center. Yes, so that no other horse is discarded for being considered useless, so that other people can discover what I learned with Windrunner. That value isn't measured by immediate utility or external appearance. At that moment, Thomas Anderson approached, having observed the conversation from a distance. "I can contribute suitable land for this project," he offered, to general astonishment. "And additional funds for the initial construction." Edward Miller joined the group. "Helen would have loved this idea. Count on my support too, financial and technical." Melissa, who had remained silent during the exchange, finally spoke. "We can establish partnerships with the veterinary college, internship programs, applied research in equine rehabilitation." While the details of the nascent project were discussed with growing enthusiasm, Tyler briefly stepped away, returning to Windrunner, who was observing the scene with that dignified serenity that had become his trademark. "You did this," whispered Tyler, caressing the animal's neck. "Not just the race. You united people who would never have talked, revealed the best in each of us." Windrunner responded with a gentle head movement, as if perfectly understanding. In the week following the historic race, the Helen Miller Equine Rehabilitation Center project was officially announced. What had begun as a story of humiliation had transformed into a legacy that would benefit future generations, both horses and people. In the quiet mornings before the day's movement began, Tyler still took Windrunner for walks to the creek, no longer as treatment, but as a celebration of the path traveled. Melissa frequently accompanied them, the relationship between her and Tyler naturally evolving into something deeper than friendship or partnership. On one of these mornings, they found Edward contemplating the sunrise at the creek's edge. He had brought something with him, a small carved wooden box. I found this among Helen's belongings, he explained, handing the box to Tyler. I think it now belongs to you. Inside the box was an old horseshoe, polished by time, with an inscription engraved, "Some run with their legs, the rare ones run with their heart." Tyler raised his eyes to Edward, understanding the depth of the gesture. "Thank you." "No," replied Edward, looking at Windrunner, who was quietly drinking from the creek. "I thank you for completing what—" Helen began. That afternoon, as he watched the community children learning the first principles of equine care at the newly inaugurated center, Tyler reflected on the extraordinary journey that a simple act of compassion had unleashed. Windrunner grazed peacefully in the adjacent field, retired from competitions, but beginning a new and equally important career as a living symbol of resilience and dignity. The story that had begun with an attempt at humiliation had transformed into a testimony of the regenerative power of kindness, not just for a discarded horse, but for an entire community that was rediscovering values long forgotten in the accelerated rhythm of modern life. And Tyler, the washerwoman's son who had dared to defy imposed expectations, now understood that some victories cannot be measured by trophies or public recognition. The most significant are those that transform who we are, revealing capacities that were always there, dormant, awaiting only the courage of a first step towards the seemingly impossible. Dear listeners, we hope that Tyler and Windrunner's story has touched your hearts. To continue this journey of authentic emotions, we've prepared a special playlist with equally inspiring stories about overcoming, dignity, and new beginnings. Find it here, with a simple click to the left. If this narrative awakened something in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Daily, we bring stories like this, which explore the many layers of human experience and remind us of the transformative power of